Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
So welcome to another episode of the Rediscovery channel, where each week we rediscover history together. This week I have again with me Great Pharaoh and Ivor, and my name is Stilgar, and I want to talk to you guys about somebody you may or may not have heard about. It's a Dutch politician called Pim Fortuyn. Has any of you heard of him before, by any chance?
What's his name?
Pim Fortuyn.
No, I haven't heard of Pim Fortuyn before.
Okay. All right. So maybe give you a little bit of background. So I'm Dutch, Dutch American, but living in Holland again. And back in the day when he was killed, I was actually really interested in this politician as a professor. And I would call him kind of like the Trump of the Netherlands, although, we're talking early thousands, late 90s here when his career was blooming. And I just want to talk a little bit more about who he was and the kind of influence he's had on Dutch politics, society as a whole. I want to talk about, maybe also do a little bit about what if. Anyway, what if he was still around? I think I can say that. So he was actually murdered back in, I should have that, I think it was 2001. So
2001,
anyway,
I actually went to Spain, so I may have been, that's a kind of uncanny. He may have been getting assassinated when I was on my tour.
Okay, so actually it was 2002 and it was May 6th. Okay, and anyway, so it was actually, we're recording this on May 7th. So I was reminded last year. There's a statue of him. I'll include pictures. And people still put up flowers. And he came up on my Twitter feed, and I was like, you know what? I should do something about him because he was a right-wing politician that had a huge impact on Dutch and I would say European politics as a whole. So let me tell a little bit more about who Pim Fortuyn was, his background, some of his ideas. And then go to his murder, and then later on I want to talk about his influence and what if he hadn't been killed. So he was Pim Fortuyn. So I know it's a difficult name, but Pim basically is P-I-M. He was a Dutch politician and sociologist who was born in 1948 in a small village in northern Holland. And he grew up in a strict Catholic family. And he was an intelligent and ambitious child and who excelled in school. But he was raised by the nuns. So he was, even though he really hated the nuns, he did consider becoming, joining the clergy himself. But he didn't because of the celibacy. And he was actually an openly gay politician. Which which is interesting, and it was very much part of, I would say, Dutch culture to accept to be accepting of that. Going back,
I'm sorry, Stilgar. Wasn't Milo Yiannopoulos also raised Catholic?
Yeah, yes, he was, at least I think he converted to Catholicism afterwards,
or he might have been Anglican.
And I do know he converted to Catholicism in the end, and I know there's a lot of movement, or it's a strong movement, I think, within the right or the new right to reevaluate Catholicism.
Yeah, a lot of people that are going towards that.
Yeah.
Also going towards orthodoxy.
Yeah, but Pim was he was openly gay, and he started off his academic career studying sociology, and he became a professor of Marxism and socialist theory at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam and the University of Groningen. And he wanted to join the Communist Party, and later on he joined the PvdA, which is like the Partij van de Arbeid. It's like the Dutch Social Democrats. And he was part of them for many years. He joined in the late 80s and then in the early 90s. No, actually he joined before, but in the late 80s and early 90s, he began to distance himself from the socialist movement. And he became disillusioned with its focus on class struggle and its failure to address issues of cultural identity and immigration. So he eventually left the Dutch Social Democrat Party, so the PvdA, and he joined the right wing, which is right wing according to the Dutch, which is actually the Liberal Party, the VVD, which is considered right wing over here. But basically, they are just, they're about open market. I guess that's the right wing part, and then, but really, they're liberal. So it's more about, you do you, boo. That's kind of their, I would say, their political identity, and that's also very much part of the Dutch cultural history. Is basically like individual freedom, individual liberty, doing whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't infringe upon other people's rights, and that's basically it.
So like in America, we would call that the libertarian, like for our American audience. That sounds basically like that. That's basically the libertarian platform as well.
Yeah, and they were anti-monarchy, I think, at some point. But I mean, there's not much left of it. If you look at it nowadays, it's much more like the Democrats than anything. So they're highly aligned to big corporations here in the Netherlands, like Unilever and Shell and Philips and others. And it's really, it's
down the drain.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, his political career took off in the early 2000s when he founded his own political party, the Pim Fortuyn List, LPF, List Pim Fortuyn, which aimed to address what he saw as the failures of the Dutch political establishment. So at this point in time, the Social Democrats, together with the VVD, so the Liberal Party, had been ruling for, I think, 8 years. And really, the country felt like it was without a direction. Like we didn't really know where we were going. There were open borders. There was financial pressure on the budget, and there was really like no idea. Like, okay, what does it mean to be Dutch? Where do we want to go as a country? And he kind of stepped up, and he was like, well, some of the ways, like the direction we're going, like it's not right. And he took some strong stances. For example, he was highly critical of Islam, which he thought was incompatible with Western values and culture. And he wanted a tougher stance on immigration and asylum seekers. So that he was one of the first, I guess, to start doing that, and he really did it through an intellectual lens. So he wrote multiple books about some of the challenges. For example, he wrote one on Islam as well, and he was really critical of like integration within Dutch society, because he saw that we have large Moroccan and Turkish immigration groups, and since then we've gotten more, like Syrian refugees, for example. And he noticed that, of course, there is some immigration, but a lot of Muslims they're sticking to themselves because of their adherence to Sharia laws. And and being somebody that's his viewpoints were nationalistic, so he was about Dutch excellence, individualistic, so being able to make your own decisions and having personal responsibility, as well as women's rights and gay rights and democracy. And he thought that all of those points are basically incompatible with Islam. That was his view. And he debated the existing parties, and he did a really good job. And basically, they were the existing polities from like the Green politicians from the Green Party, the Democrats. They were unable to really come up with good arguments. So guess what they did instead?
What did they killed each other?
Well, they didn't. They didn't literally kill him, but they started demonizing him. So they were started calling him an Islamophobe, a racist, a fascist, etc. Sounds familiar if you're American, probably, and I think to much other people in the West as well. But this guy was he was incredibly intelligent, and he was laying out like, okay, so here are some of the issues, and then he would ask, okay, well, how do you see this progressing? Where do you see this going? And people really didn't know how to answer that. That was something completely new, and his popularity continued to grow and grow. And then up to the 2002 election, he was a serious contender to become the prime minister, basically. And I remember the day I was actually in college to become a history teacher at the time. I remember being there and finding out that he had just gotten out of a radio interview with I think it was it was the NP, so it was the Dutch national television. He had just done an interview, had gone out, and on the media terrain, he was shot point blank in the head by Volkert van der Graaf, who was an animal rights activist. I like how they always mention activist. I would say terrorist. But apparently, if you're on the left, you get the word activist. But he was opposed to his views on immigration and Islam. It really changed the safety or the view of how politics worked in the Netherlands. Because before that, it had been a reasonably open society. And later on, not that much later, we also had Theo van Gogh, who was killed in broad daylight as well for his criticism.
I was gonna ask you about that, but he was riding his bike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he
killed him.
He was killed, and then also he was connected. Theo was connected to what's her name? And now I can't think of her name. Who was also a prominent VVD politician at the time from Somalia. What's her name?
Hirsi Ali.
Yeah, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. That's right. Yeah, and they actually got her out of the country or kicked her out because she lied or supposedly lied during her application to become a citizen. But it was really just a technicality. And then anyway, now she's in a better place in the US anyway, doing good work. Anyway, so they were he was killed in 2004, Theo, and then I think Ayaan, I think she left not that much later. I think it's really an interesting murder, tragic murder, because you always hear that there's always extremism on the right, and of course there is. But here, this person was killed by an animal, quote unquote, activist, animal activists, which they've been really, really causing a lot of problems in the Netherlands for years, like setting farms on fire, threatening farmers, etc. And this guy, of course, his party ended up winning the election afterwards by a landslide. But because he was gone, the people that took over, they were all like opportunistic, and they didn't have the leadership or vision to really guide the party to where it could have gone. And that was the end. Really, it kind of fizzled out. Of course, now you have Geert Wilders, but Geert Wilders is intellectually, he's not nowhere near as on the same level as Pim was. And yeah, it's just an interesting way to like how this influence. Yeah, okay. So let me talk about Dutch society later, but also about the European politicians, because Pim really had a big influence on parties like the AFD, the Alternative für Deutschland, which, by the way, is also being led by somebody that's gay, or it's a lesbian actually, which is interesting. And they're calling it pink washing, but it's also because which I think is funny, because it's Alice Weidel. She's very critical of Islam, but I think it's for good reason, because like if you're gay in the Muslim world, basically, you don't have a life. So it's interesting that some of these people that are on the extreme left are so close to Islam. But I think this has to do with how individual freedom versus collectivism is basically where it's at. So you have the Western society where you have the individual freedom and responsibilities versus collectivism in Islam, but also in communism, where it's groups and power struggles. So it's more about the ideology of the group as far over the individual's rights and responsibilities. So I think that's where they're finding each other. But the interesting thing is, of course, that if you look at the group, the group, even like the rights of the group of like homosexuals within Islam, it's basically death. So it's interesting that there's this alliance.
With one exception, in Afghanistan, they think it's not gay as long as the male is like under 20. They call them bachi-bazi. And then, there's some horror stories about that from some of the soldiers. They saw some of that while they were over there. And they wanted to stop it, but our government was like, no, you can't stop it. It's their culture. But I think Afghanistan's, a little different from normal Islam.
Yeah, I think so too. And by the way, I also wanted to talk about another German politician who also came from the left and was ostracized later on, which is Thilo Sarrazin, who wrote the book Deutschland schafft sich ab, which is basically Germany is abolishing itself. He's another intellectual who's talking about the demographic realities of how the country is changing, and this was pre Merkel's 2015 "Wir schaffen das," so we can do it, and it has only accelerated since. The amount of immigration, the same for the Netherlands, by the way. It has only accelerated. We've taken up a lot of refugees from countries that have been destroyed basically by the U.S. To be honest, that's creating a lot of havoc, and we have to deal with the refugees. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing to have this left-wing, openly gay guy who is then defending like individual rights and freedoms. And I was thinking, like, okay, what would Pim Fortuyn have thought about the current culture war? And honestly, I think he would have been opposed to it as well, because it's a Marxist ideology, it's groupthink, and it's all about power struggles instead of individual rights and responsibilities. And he was also a fan, or he was proud to be Dutch, proud of our heritage. and I think, of course, the Netherlands there's been some bad things that has happened for sure, some horrible things, but there's also a lot of things that were beautiful about the country and our accomplishments. um and yeah, anyway, I think he probably would have ended up in somewhere on the side of Geert Wilders, for example, but just on a much higher intellectual basis. um and I just wonder what the country would have been like had he not been murdered at the time. I think his death did spawn a lot of alt-right um, people throughout Europe and the world, and he inspired a lot of people. Of course, Haider is another one that I believe he was killed as well in Austria, um, after Pim. But I really wonder like what the country could have been like, and really what society could be like had we followed that vision, um, and had we had an intellectual champion that really could have seen things through. Um, yeah. Anyway, so that's why I wanted to just take some time and review this person that had a huge impact on Dutch politics, European politics. Um, could have had a huge impact on our society, and potentially even influenced people like Trump and the modern movements in some of the culture wars, or yeah, so even like people like Milo and others. Yeah.
When
So yeah.
what did he have to say about the EU while he was there?
Yeah, he was highly critical of it as well. Um, so I think he was a federalist, and I'm guessing he probably would have been, not 100% sure, but I think he would have been supporting of an exit,
Hmm.
or some sort of different model, maybe the Norwegian model, where we would have kept more of our independence, but still had open borders when it comes to trade, at least. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard other people, criticizing the U.S. and blaming the United States for all the Muslim immigration that's going into Europe. And one way that's true, because our government does go and assassinate Middle Eastern dictators. And then, after those Middle Eastern dictators are the ones that are maintaining order. So after they're gone, it gets all chaotic and everything. But on the other hand, most of these illegals that are coming into Europe are unarmed. Like you could repel them with World War I level technology, like a Gatling gun. But the only reason it doesn't get done is because most of the
We could do it with a fence.
yeah,
So
because you
yeah.
got traitors in
No, I
charge
mean,
of
I agree. The politicians, we're basically vassal states over here, and
yes.
we're thoroughly indoctrinated by the same people that rule the United States, also rule Europe. That's
Hmm.
my belief.
Starts with a
Um,
W.
yeah, yeah, and it's all part of the same club. So, but it's funny how like how fast the West is degrading. Um, and I think sometimes people say, well, like, why don't Europeans take better care of themselves? Well,
Not
like
yeah.
we're not. I don't think we're independently run. Like our media are not independent, and a lot of yeah, part of my words, shit is also thrown at us. From the US, like like the pipelines that are blown up, or
Yep.
shitty vaccines that are
Mm.
released because of stuff that's being released in China that was funded by the US. So there's a lot of things happening. Now you have Ukraine as well, where there could have been peace already had it not been for the Americans and the British. So it's an interesting situation, but
It's
unfortunately,
still
the
it's
media
important.
here are like completely. You have the transatlantic community, which is basically set up by American free letter agencies to control the media here, and a lot of people buying into it. Just hook, line, and sinker. They buy it all. So I'm not sure how to I think a lot of people woke up after the past couple years. But still, like, there's so many people that just don't know. Yeah. So anyway,
I think it's important to tell the difference, especially for our anyone listening overseas. There's a difference between Americans and the government. Like, we have our own ideas and our own culture, and the government has different ideas and different culture. The government is basically part of that globalist cabal, and we don't really have any way of we don't vote for this stuff. We don't have any control over them. It's not like we're conspiring with them to do this. Like, they go into these other countries and they fly they're.
And they're using the same methods on the American public as they do over here.
Yeah.
Like, back at, during the Iraq War, I thought it was a good idea. I thought, Saddam was the bad guy, and like, it's only because it's not like he was a saint, but there was so much propaganda going on, and because I found out afterwards, I've been extremely critical when it came to people like Assad, and all these false flag operations. But yeah, I can't blame the Americans for not being informed on what their government is doing. So there's just
I actually kind of like Assad because he defends the Christian community in Syria. Like, he's the one that's protecting them.
Yeah, he's part of the what do you call them again? They're not Sunni. They're part of the Sunni, but they're like Alavites.
Alawite.
Yeah.
Great Pharaoh. What is it called?
I know that there's the Sunni and the Shia sect, but I'm not aware of the Alavites.
They're actually part of the Shiite sect. I remember now.
Some kind of minority.
That Muhammad's descendants come, like Ali is part of Muhammad's descendants, and then like another one, and then the Sunni believe like the descendants of Muhammad is like Omar ibn al-Khattab or something like. I'm not sure exactly who. Probably, I think that was a scholar. Sorry, but some other descendant.
The Alavites. There are a lot of Kurds are Alavites. And there are also some Turks, and they're usually an oppressed minority because they are more secular than the Sunni and the Shiites are. So
it's Alawi, Alawi, and they're affiliated with the Shiites.
Yeah.
And
I know that that he is one. What was he? The
Alawite is what you call a member of the group.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we came a long way from the Alavites, but some of these problems, of course, linger on within Dutch society. We just had we're also importing other things from the modern culture war. Like, I used to teach in Amsterdam, where there's a lot of people from Suriname, and they were like really well like good people, just very traditional, conservative in many ways. And they're importing a lot of things from the American culture wars, from American Black culture, and it's not helping them. It's not. Like, whereas they had like their income was almost the same, and their occupation levels were almost the same as Dutch people, a little bit lower, but very close. And now they're importing all this Black rap culture, and like victimhood and stuff like that, and it's really creating basically racism against white people.
Yes.
And now the other day, actually, I think it was this weekend, there was a whole group of kids, so basically that beat up this white kid and threw him on the train track. And of course, the media is all like hush hush about it, but Yeah, we're importing a lot of bad Marxist stuff. It's almost like we're under attack. And there are no winners. I don't know who the winners are, but they're definitely not the Surinamese people. They're not the Moroccans. They're not the Turkish people. It's not the Dutch people.
Central
So
bankers and
yeah, somebody is.
corporations.
I guess.
They're the ones that
Divide and conquer. I guess. I think that must be the motto. So
That is what
yeah,
they divide this country in order to get the vote. They have to divide us, pin us into two. That's what
yeah.
that
So we're too busy hating on each other. So nobody notices them taking all the money or printing all the money or doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're very highly successful. I have to say. So unfortunately, yeah. So yeah, that was my story. Pim Fortuyn, Professor Pim Fortuyn, RIP. Could have, yeah, he had a major impact regardless, but I think he could have done a lot. And we all talking about the environment and stuff, and like he wanted stricter border control. If you look at the environment, like we're pretty far up north. We're like Canada levels here in Holland. Our winters are pretty cold, like, and we're taking in all these people from like Africa or Northern Africa. Guess what the CO2 footprint is compared to them living here compared to over there? It's huge difference.
Yeah, all that
Um,
CO2 footprint and
yeah, I mean
global
you have
warming
to
is
heat
just an excuse. It's
you have to
just an
heat your
excuse.
homes and stuff. So like if you really cared about the environment, like now they're getting rid of all the farmers here in Holland because of carbon dioxide, or it's all just so crazy. So yeah, interesting times we're living in for sure. But it's we need people that are intellectual champions like Pim Fortuyn, that can really work this out, but also know how to work the media, because that's a challenging part. Is like as soon as you become a threat, like the new lady Caroline of the BBB party. It's like the Boerenburgerbeweging. It's like the farmer citizen movement.
Hmm.
As soon as she's doing really well in the parliament, the first parliament, and the second parliament is more important. So for the next votes, like if we had votes now, she'd be the number one party. But they're already trying to smear her, trying to make her look like she's some kind of evil lady. And they're using all kinds of tricks. Like if you don't participate in what the media wants, then they're trying to make her into like some kind of far right extremist, which she's not. She's just a salt of the earth kind of lady. And the smear campaign is going on, and they've not learned. The media has not learned at all from the death of Pim Fortuyn, I have to say. So it's very sad. Um, yeah. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. I know that Holland is in the news a lot because of basically a lot of our politicians are owned by a club that starts with a W.
Yep.
And so I thought I'd talk a little bit more about the background. And like, yeah, you can be a liberal in the Dutch sense. Actually means like more like a libertarian. It's like like you do what you do, but you take care of other people. You don't want to. You're respectful. It's an individual kind of way of running things, where you don't need police because everybody is kind of like, yeah, they're all citizens, right? Everybody's educated. Everybody's on a higher level. And we're slowly but surely losing that. So sad times, for
Yeah,
sure.
and a couple of things I know about Netherlands is you guys actually have about the same population density as India, but the average standard of living obviously is much better. And also, I think you guys are the second largest. I think I'm about 80% sure the second largest exporter of food after the United States. And then the other thing is that a lot of the land was reclaimed from the ocean. It used to be under the water. So whenever these leftists are talking about like, oh, we need to protect the land, we need to let it go back to the natural environment. I'm like, what? You mean under the water again? Because it's like, I think what, 1/4 of the country was taken out of the ocean, right? Something
Yeah,
like
where I live, if there were no dunes or dikes, basically my house would be underwater. And I think that's also a threat to the modern narrative, is because there are alternatives. Like you can actually use human engineering and ingenuity to build things, even though like the environment is not hospitable. And if you look at it now, like our number one threat is not at the moment is not floods; it's actually droughts. So they're actually talking about how to store more water again instead of pumping it straight to the sea. Yeah, rising water levels or ocean levels. People always talking about it. I'm not worried
fake.
about it at all.
Me neither.
Because we have dikes and dunes, and basically what we could just do is we could, should water levels start to increase rapidly, which they haven't so far, but let's say they will, then if we still have that strong Dutch society, that can do mentality, working together for the general good, which they're trying to break down with everything they've got. Don't ask me why, but if we still have that, then we will be fine. So yeah. Anyway.
Okay, cool. All right, so we can move on here to the next topic.
Yeah. All right. So
but-
let me hit. Let me thank everybody. If you can give maybe a like and share and subscribe. I think we're close to 1,000. And other than that, let's move on to the next one. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.